And one of the big complaints that men have is that my wife, my girlfriend, she expects me to read my mind. We can't read minds.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for tuning in to Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life. Hey, Silka.
Hello, Paige. We just talked off camera. It was kind of funny. As we come up with ideas and topics for these segments, we've done a lot lately on gray divorce, why so many women tend to, file for divorce more so than men. And we were asked by men to please do some why is that? And the number one complaint that seems to be written about, that we hear about, is that men just don't listen. And we really drove that home. And that's what I said to you, it's not all the men's fault. This is a 50-50 thing. And one of the big complaints that men have is that my wife, my girlfriend, she expects me to read my mind. We can't read minds. And you know what? They're right. I know I'm at fault in that. And so I want to focus this segment on why we do that and how we, can stop and communicate better and not contribute to this communication gap. Paige, what do you have to say?
Well, I'd like to say that when we're in our 20s and 30s, we do not as good as a job as women communicating, or we might, act more childish or just shut down and not speak, or just be like, how come he doesn't know this? I want him to know what's going on with me. Yet what I see is we age, we start to really realize that can't happen, that it really is about looking at yourself as a woman and figuring out, what do you need? What do you want? What does that look like? How do I articulate that? And when is the good timing to share that with my significant other?
I totally agree with you. I also think, though, that just because we age, we don't necessarily get better at this. I mean, just the other day, I was talking to a good friend, very good friend of mine back from high school. And, she said, I wish that he would ask me to marry him. And I said, well, but you've said before, you made a big point that you don't want to get married again. I know, but now that we've been together for a while, it's like, maybe I do. I said, well, you need to tell him. Because, but he should know that. We're 60.
So if you're still making the same mistakes, and you know what, we do that, especially when we're in the throes of an argument or throes of what's going on, and everything we've learned just goes out the window. So yeah, absolutely. The big thing is, what I have found is that women more so than men are afraid to ask for what they need because of what's gone on in society. Remember, we've grown up in a world where we weren't allowed to ask what we needed. And if we did, we didn't get it because we were not, what's the word that I'm trying to say, Sukha? It was more of a man's world.
Yes.
So we were kind of pushed down to the side. So we have to remember that, decades and decades, that's what it's been like for women. So 50 and over, when you grew up in that, it's a little bit harder to remember that, hell no, this is ridiculous. That was then, this is now. So that's one thing. Second thing is, what I find is fear. Women are more fearful at times to ask for what they need, because if they ask for it and they don't get what they want, then what will they do? And then they have to make a decision. Do they want to stay in this relationship? How do they work with this relationship? So sometimes women will think, well, maybe it's better just to have muddy waters, because then I don't have to make a decision. Well, then you're going to live in muddy waters, and it's going to get stinky, and it's going to get dark and muddy and all that kind of stuff. So, asking for what you need and want, before you ask, you have to know, what is it that you need? Because a need and a want are two different things. What is it that you need in this relationship that you're not getting, that's paramount? Once you know that, what's the correct verbiage to use so it comes across clearly? Men out there, they are black and white. You have to really be clear and detailed as to what you want. For instance, it has to be, I need you to paint the room in the back which is the bedroom. Here's the paint colors. Here's the tools. And I was thinking we could do it this Saturday. Here's the time frame. So they have all of the information because as you said off camera, Silka, men are more problem solvers. Give them a situation so they can fix it and solve it. However, on the flip side, and I know I'm talking a lot here.
That's okay.
Women don't always want problem solvers. We can solve our problems. What we want when we communicate is a communication that goes back and forth about these are my needs, these are my wants, and then have their significant other kind of give their feedback and talk about it, not just be like, okay, got it. Because most of the time, if a significant other says, got it, there's something that's lacking there. There's something that doesn't come across clearly. So I'll just pause for a moment.
Well, I think we're going where I want to go, which is to give some tips, give some tips for food for thought, to really look at ourselves, blame is one of them. When you're communicating, don't put blame into it. Like you're just a bad communicator. You never listen. Don't start out that way when you're trying to get something across, because right away you shut them down. And so in this segment, I really want to focus on what we as women can control on our part, in this communication process that will allow men to listen and want to listen to what we have to say. And I think one of the, don't talk too long. You just said you've been talking. When you're trying to get a point across, I guess don't go on forever.
There has to be a pause button that you have. And it's really hard because some women process really quickly. So they're already ahead of what the person's going to say. And that's not a good place to be because you're not in the present with the person either. So it's really being clear about what you want. And I tell women all the time, if you need to write notes, have a little note, write it down, be clear exactly what it is that you want, and state that clearly, and then pause. And then ask for some feedback from your significant other as to, where they are with that. Is that something that they think that they can do? What kind of questions do they have? Most of the time, you're going to have to backfill, what all of the details are, because men most of the time aren't going to ask like a woman would. If a man came to a woman and said, "Can you do this?" We're going to ask where, when, why, how, what color, what detail. Like we want to ask all of the information so we can do it clearly.
I want to make sure I do it right. So that's the difference.
And that's the big thing is who wants to do it right, who wants to do it well, who wants to do it consistent. And men and women both do that, but women will more apt to dig deep to find out the details to make sure. Where men will be like, okay, I got it. When sometimes they don't really have it. So make sure as a woman that you give the details about what it is. Have a kind of a recap. Can you just let me know? Can you say back to what I need just so we're clear on this so there's no miscommunication? So I don't want to be the one who ends up saying, oh, I'm blaming you, because we're both a part of what this communication is. But I need to say, too, when we're doing communication, there's lots of other baggage that's in the role of communication. There's history between the two. There's things that haven't been resolved. There's frustrations that both people have. That until you work out your own stuff alone as to what your anger, your frustration, your resentments are, the communication that you have is not going to be clear until that stuff is worked out individually, right, and then come together to discuss. That's a really big point.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, and then that's not to say that men can't, that this is not a point where making your own intelligence or the ability to.
It has nothing to do with intelligence, but it does have something to do with emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
As far as, how connected are you to your emotions, to your wants, to your needs, and how to articulate that.
Right.
So for each person, how are you connected to that?
Yeah. Well, and again, on the part of women, looking what we maybe do wrong. One, again, and we're kind of starting to come to the end of the segment here. So here's what I'd like to leave them with, and then I'll throw it over to you. One, again, don't expect your man to read your mind. If you've ever said, well, you should know that. How long have we been together? You should have brought this home for dinner. Stop that. You're at fault when you're doing that. Maybe he should, maybe he shouldn't, but that doesn't help. And the other thing is, don't communicate or try to communicate when he's distracted, like watching a football game, reading the page. Make sure that you have his attention So, and he's in a place where he wants to listen. Paige, I'll let you finish it out.
I have to say something about, is he in a place where he wants to listen? Because what I find consistently from women is it's hard to find men to be in a place where they want to
Yes.
listen. And that's a really hard thing. And I have to say, women get upset with, I'm tired of trying to find the right time, the right minute, the right tone, the right this. I have to say what I need to say no matter where it is. So that's another big thing that comes along with, it's not so black and white when you've been in a relationship for a while.
I agree.
So, that's a whole other show as to, how do you deal with that. But if there is something really important that you need to say, what I would tell or ask my significant other is, there's something I really want to talk about. It's really important to me, and I really need your time, your presence, your energy. So when would be a good time in the very, very near future, whether it's today, tomorrow, or the next 48 hours, that we can do this? That way it's very clear and concise as to what you're asking, what you need from this other person.
Yeah. No, I agree. Paige, thank you. I know that there'll be some emotions and opinions around this. Please leave them and let us know if you have, other questions that we can cover on these segments, because it is very important. So we will see you on our next segment of Our Second Act with Paige and Silka.
For your second act of life.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Please be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done so. The button is right here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see that little bell next to the subscribe button, hit that too, and we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you soon.